Welcome to the Creating Assessments and Adding Questions to Assessments demo. In this demo, you will learn how to create an assessment, including setting restrictions, submission views, number of attempts, random folders, and adding questions onto the assessment shell. You will connect the assessment to the gradebook if you have already set up your gradebook categories and items. At the end of this demo, you will have assessments created and ready for your students to take. First, log in to your D2L Brightspace account and go into your course. On the gray course navigation bar, click on the Assessments link. Click on the New Quiz button to create a new assessment. Notice the 6 tabs along the top. We will work with 4 of these tabs to set up the assessment. Starting on the Properties tab, in the Name field, type in the name of your assessment. Example, Week 6 Quiz. For the Category drop-down menu, if you decide to use categories on your assessment page, such as Test, Pre-Test, Quiz, or Self-Assessment, to organize your assessments, you will need to first create them using the Add Category link. If you have already created your categories, use the drop-down menu to select the correct category. Next, click on the Add Edit Questions button. This screen is the same screen you had when you were creating your questions in the question library. If you skip the question library demos and don't have any questions created yet, don't panic. You can still create questions here. However, it is better to create them in the question library and then import them into the assessment. This will allow you the option of importing the question to multiple assessments as you need them. To create questions now outside of the question library, use the New drop-down button and pick the type of question you need to create. You can also create a new section first in order to keep the area more organized. If you need help creating questions, view the Creating Sections and Questions in the Question Library demos. If you have already created your questions in the question library, click on the Import button. From the Import Source drop-down menu, select From an Existing Collection. In the Source Collection drop-down menu, select Question Library. In the Source Section drop-down menu, select the name of the section that holds your questions. After the screen refreshes, select the questions you want on this assessment. If you want all of the questions, select the box at the top next to the section folder name. When you are finished selecting questions, click the Save button in the bottom left corner. Repeat this import process until you have all of your questions. Then, click the Done Editing Questions button in the upper right corner of the screen. If you want students to receive a random set of questions, you can create a random section in the assessment. A random folder has a certain number of questions in it. You will tell the test how many questions to select for the test from that folder. For example, the folder might have 6 of the same type of questions in it, and you tell the test to select 2 of those questions for each student. You also have an option of making certain questions mandatory, so every student has to take those particular questions, and then the remaining questions can be randomized. Instead of building questions inside a random folder, questions can only be imported into random folders. So make sure you set them up in the question library first. click the Add Edit Questions button. Select New, then Random Section. Enter a name for the random section in the section name field, and then select Save. Note that the random section has a purple folder icon beside it. Click on the folder for the random section you just created to open it. Select Import, and then choose the folder from the question library where the questions are located that you wish to import under the Section Source drop-down box. The folders and questions within it will appear below. Choose the questions or the entire folder if you would like all of them. Remember, if you choose them all, then they will all be possible questions. Click Save. You are now looking at a list of all of the questions. At the top, select how many per attempt, which will determine how many random questions will appear out of the list below. If you enter 2, for example, and have 6 possible questions, then each student will receive 2 randomized questions out of the 6. They will not necessarily be the same 2 for each student. You also have the option of changing the points for each question. Click Save at the top before you select Done Editing Questions. To return to the Properties tab. You're now looking at your test setup. In the Questions per Page area, you can decide how many questions are on each page of the assessment, and whether or not the student can look at previous pages as they progress through the test. The best practice is to divide your test into pages, with a maximum of 5 questions per page. For our example, we'll set the questions per page at 4. Click the Apply button. Note that blue lines appear in your test showing where the page breaks fall. This helps your students because every time a student goes to another page while taking the assessment, the previous page's questions will automatically be saved and logged. If you need to change the default point value for your questions, click on the Edit Values button. Scroll down the page and change the points as necessary. This is also where you can decide if a question is a bonus question. Click the box in the bonus column if a question is a bonus question. When you use this feature, the total score will no longer include the points from the bonus questions. Click Save. Under Optional Advanced Properties, click the Expand Optional Advanced Properties link. Here, you can allow hints that you have built into your assessment to be displayed or not. You can have an email sent to you when someone completes the assessment, and you can allow right-click and pager/email access. Click Save. Under the Restrictions tab, in the Dates and Restrictions section, you have the ability to use start and end dates for your assessment. Under the Status drop-down, you have the options for inactive and active. A new exam defaults to inactive status. For a student to be able to see your assessment, this option must be changed to active. If you use the start and end date options, along with the active option, students will only be able to click on the assessment during the time frame you choose. You can choose to have this displayed in the calendar. In the Additional Release Conditions section, you may add special circumstances for when students may view your assessment. If you need help setting up release conditions, view the Setting Up Release Conditions demo. In the Security Options section, you have the ability to only allow students to take your assessment if they are using the Respondus Lockdown browser, which locks out access to the rest of the Internet. If you want to use these options, do not use these settings. You will need to use the new Respondus Lockdown browser widget. For more information, watch the Using the Respondus Lockdown browser widget demo. In the Optional Advanced Restrictions settings, you have the option to assign your assessment a password and to lock down the test to a range of IP addresses. If you want to use the IP address feature, please contact the Office of Educational Technology, and we will give you the IP address range for Midlands Technical College. When you use this feature, students will only be able to start an assessment if the computer they are using is connected to the Midlands Technical College network. For timing, you can choose to set a time limit by clicking the Enforce the Time Limit radio button. Type the number of minutes in the time limit field for how long the user has to complete the assessment, and the grace period field to determine how many minutes the user has after the time limit expires to submit the assessment before it is flagged late. You must include a grace period of at least 1 minute. Let's review the late submission options. These decide what to do when the student is late submitting the assessment. When deciding whether to use any of the late submission options, it is good to know how the assessment stores information. If the number of questions the student can see per page is limited, when a student clicks the Go to the next page or Submit the assessment, that constitutes an action that is logged in the system. Quiz is flagged as late, but student can continue working. Lets users submit quizzes if time limit and grace period has passed. Quiz is flagged as late, and student is prevented from making further changes. If the time limit and grace period are exceeded, the system automatically submits the assessment, including all questions saved before the time limit and grace period expired. Once the student performs an action, clicking Next Page, Save, or Submit, any questions not saved prior to these, even if answered, will not be submitted. When a student clicks Next Page while taking an assessment, it will also save the questions on that page. This means that it is better to have only a few questions per page if you select Auto Submit. That way, whenever the student progresses to the next page, the assessment will be saved to the last page's answers. Quiz is flagged as late, but student can continue working. Quiz will automatically scored as 0 after the specified limit. If the time limit, grace period, and late limit period are exceeded, the user is given a grade of 0. It is important to explain to the student to watch the clock if you use this function. Students will be able to continue answering questions even if the limit has been passed, but will receive a 0. If you have multiple pages within the assessment and the student passes the late limit, then a pop-up box will appear when they try to go to the next page, alerting them that they have exceeded the time limit. If all of the questions are on one page, then no pop-up box will appear until the student goes to submit the assessment, which will tell them that they have exceeded the late limit. In general, when using either of the last two functions, it is better to use multiple pages with a couple of questions on them, 1 to 5, so that students' answers will automatically be saved when progressing. There will be a log of their answers, and they cannot continue answering questions without being notified by a pop-up box that they have exceeded the time limit, or their assessment has automatically been submitted. In the Special Access section, with the Allow Selected Users Special Access to this assessment option clicked, you can click on the Add Users to Special Access button and give specific students access to the assessment on a different time frame than what was used above in the Dates field. This option is normally used if specific students miss the assessment for an excused reason and need to take the assessment on a different date than the rest of the class. You can change the dates, time limits, grace period, and late limits for selected students. When you do this, you will notice a key icon next to your test name in the assessment list. Click Save. Back at the top, click on the Assessment tab. Under Grade Item, the assessment can be connected to the gradebook. If you haven't already set up your gradebook, do that first and then return to the assessment. If you need help, view the Creating Grade Items demo. In order for D2L Brightspace to automatically grade the assessment, you will need to check the box next to Automatic Grade. If you forget to do this, students will not receive a grade at the end of their assessment, and you will have to manually grade the assessment. If you turn this on in the middle of an assessment, the students who complete the assessment after you resave the assessment will get graded automatically. But any students who start and/or complete the assessment before this option is selected will still have to be manually graded. The automatic grade function will not work if the test contains long answer questions. If you have already created your own grade items, use the drop-down menu to select the correct grade item. Notice that the categories will appear in bold. You cannot choose categories. You must choose grade items. Grade items will appear in regular text. Only grade categories and items that are numeric and haven't been assigned will be displayed. Select the grade item you want. If you want to add an additional grade item in a category, use the Add Grade Item link. If you decide to use a grade item, make sure that you check the box for Auto Export to Grades. This allows the grade to show up in the gradebook. Before moving on, go to the Automatic Grades section and make sure to check the box to allow attempts to be set as graded immediately upon completion. Under the Attempts section, you have the option to set the number of attempts students get on the assessment and which attempt is used for their grade. Example 2, highest attempt. Note that if the students still have attempts left, their Updates widget will show that they have assessments that they need to complete. If this is an issue and everyone has finished taking the assessment, you can change the status on the Properties tab to Inactive. Doing so will remove the assessment from their Updates widget, but still allow the students to see their grade. Note that if you use bonus questions, make sure that you return to your gradebook and verify that the gradebook item was set up to allow students' grade to exceed the max points field by checking the Can Exceed checkbox in the gradebook. If you don't use that option and the student scored 100% on the test and got the bonus right for the 5 extra points, their grade on the test would be 105, but the grade in the Grades tool will only receive 100 points. Click Save. Under the Submissions View tab, you decide what the student sees when they submit their assessment. Click on the Default View link. In the HTML editor, you can change the message the students will receive upon submission. Example: your assessment has been submitted successfully. You can now move on to Chapter 2. By default, the student only sees the score for that attempt. If you choose to show the questions from the assessment, you have the options of how much information to display. Example: yes, show all questions with user responses, show question score, and overall attempt score, show class average. When you are done making changes to the submissions view, click Save. If you want to make a limited duration view or a limited IP restricted view, click Add Additional View and put in the restrictions. When you are finished making changes to the assessment, click on the Save and Close button in the bottom left corner. If you would like to preview the assessment, click on the drop-down arrow to the right of the name of the assessment, and then select Preview. Click the Start Assessment button to start the test, and click the Exit Preview button in the upper right corner when you are finished. Look at the assessment titles. Note that the word Inactive will appear if the assessment is not active. A key will appear if there is special access. A square with 2 arrows will appear if it has a release condition. A computer connection will appear if there is an IP restriction. You have now successfully created an assessment and added questions to it.